Welcome to Soundcheck with Pastor Isaac. It is a great day outside, and so I decided to come out here and do our recording this week. This week, we're talking about Be a Witness, Tell Your Story. We're on episode number 48. And this week, I'd like to just mention to you all, these sessions are only like 14 minutes with teaching on it, but if you want to get the entire teaching, I'd like you to go to a website that I'm going to put at the bottom of the chat right now so you can see it. And I would love for you to enjoy the whole message. It's about an hour long. If you want to hear the whole thing, this is just a condensed version. Also, the message that we did last week on spring cleanup, that's also on the same website. And so you can catch both of those, the entire message, about an hour long. And I think you'll enjoy it. And it'll be a whole lot more than this 15-minute segment, which is about 14 minutes of teaching. So I'd love for you to share it. Also, give it to your friends so that they can know more about what God is saying to them too. So what we would like to do today is to talk about being a witness. We want to talk about God using you to reach your people that you know, your family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, so that they can know who God is for themselves. Episode 48, Being a Witness. And I want you to know that you need to tell your story. It's important that you tell what God has done for you. Tell somebody, tell me what God has done for you. And they will, and it's going to bless you. We're going to look at several scriptures today. We won't be able to look in the entire segment of it, but I want just to whet your appetite with it so you can dig in a little bit deeper. All right, so God allows different situations to impact your lives and my life at the same time. And every nuance in our life comes out, and it can be a story to help somebody else. We can have an incredible story that God has placed down on the inside of us because of the experiences that He's put in us that we've gone through. Now, some things we've seen and some things we've actually gone through it ourselves. And so we need to know that God has placed all these things in our life, not just for us, but to also help somebody else. Now, though I may be a witness to something, I won't know exactly what's going on with that situation, but the person who was in it, they know exactly how they felt. They know exactly all the situations of how the excitement was going, the exasperation, any of these things, the hope, the anxiety, all these things are on the inside of that person, and only that person can tell what happened to them. That's called being a witness. I can't tell you what happened to you, but you can't tell me what happened to you. I can only tell you what has happened with me. And so that's my story. That's my testimony. And so don't be afraid to express yourself. Now, today we're going to be talking about 5 different individuals, and we're going to see in the scripture their testimony, not the whole thing, but just a portion of what they were as an eyewitness. And they're going to tell us about it. We're going to look at Jesus himself, who was God's only son. We're going to look at David, the king. We're going to look at Ezekiel, the prophet, Paul, the apostle. We're also going to take a look at some regular everyday people, the Samaritan woman, the woman at the well. And we're also going to take a look at the centurion, the Roman soldier. All right, so let's look first at what Jesus himself did. All right, in Luke chapter 10, verses 17 through 21, there's an eyewitness account of Jesus seeing Satan fall as lightning. Jesus explains that in this particular passage. We're not going to take a look at that today. I want you to go back to that other video that I was posted at the bottom, and you'll get the entire message there. But I also want to look at David, the king. We'll look at Psalm 37, verse 25. It says, I have been young and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. We always think about God feeding his people when we say his seed not begging for bread. But let's look at the very first part of that particular verse. It says, I have been young and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken. That means that God has been taking care of his people, and he's been doing a whole lot more than feeding them. He's been protecting them. He's been watching over them. And so this is what David had to go on. David had a reference point. David was confident that God was going to do what he said. Remember the lion? Remember the bear? Remember the giant? God had protected David from all of these things. And so David had a reference point so that he could know and be confident in what God was going to do for him. David knew that God had never forsaken him, neither was he going to. Look in Psalm 27, verse 13. It says, I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. God was able to keep David, and he was able to give him enough confidence to know that nothing was going to come up against him so that he could be defeated. And so he knew in the land of the living, right here where David was, God was going to protect him and keep him. Yes, God is going to protect and keep you. We have those same promises that David did. So what is your story? That was David's story. That was his testimony. You have to tell what has happened with you. Now, let's look at the prophet Ezekiel. He was a prophet. Even in captivity, he was still a prophet of God, and God was using him. And if you look in chapter 1, you're going to see that's where he saw this huge whirlwind coming. It had the Lord inside of it. And it also was the place where he saw the wheel in the middle of the wheel. In verses 26 through 28, he reveals that he saw the Lord on the throne. Ezekiel also talked about in chapter 37 that he saw some bones, some very dry bones. In fact, in Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 4, it says, again, talking about God speaking to him, he said unto me, prophesy over these bones and tell them, you dry bones, hear ye the word of the Lord. And so God was able to show Ezekiel, this nation of Israel, even though they were in a barren situation, even though it was as if nothing else could happen with them that was going to be positive, God was going to raise them up. Even as dry bones, he was going to raise them up into a huge army again, full of life and ready to do the will of God. So God can flourish through you and through your people if you allow yourself to give that testimony. Who knows? You could be speaking to the nations, just as Ezekiel was speaking to the nation of Israel. But it doesn't only reach Israel. That word still speaks to us today. And so we're excited about it. Another fired up brother was Paul, the apostle. He was able to say in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, he has said unto me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And so most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest on me. And so Paul was able to have confidence that God, even though Paul was going through some situations, God was still with him, and he was going to be still strong, because where he was weak, God made him strong, not in his own power, but in the Spirit. And so we need to know that God will keep you. Even when you think you can't make it, God is on your side and he is with you. We have another one to look at, and it is the Samaritan woman at the well. She was reluctant to go and tell anybody about anything, and that's why she was coming to the well midday when everybody else had already come and gotten their water. Well, she met Jesus, and because Jesus had the answers for her, she was able to go back and tell a whole city what God had done for her. Now, she wasn't reluctant anymore. She told everyone. In fact, look in John chapter 4, verses 39 and verse 42. From that city, many of the Samaritans believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified, he told me everything that I did. They said to the woman, now we believe, not because of your speaking, for we have heard for ourselves and know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. Yes, God can use you just as he used that woman to tell people about him, and they will believe, not just because of your testimony. They will be able to have their own testimony. They will be able to say, I believe because I've heard him for myself. That's the whole point of being a witness, so that God can retrieve his people and bring them back to himself. Let's look at one more person, the centurion. The centurion was a hard worker. Yes, he was a soldier for Rome, but yet he was still being used by God. Look in Luke chapter 7, verses 2 through 10. We're just going to take one look at the verse 9. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned him about and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith. No, not in Israel. Now, what was Jesus talking about? The man had said that he believed that God was able to use Jesus to be able to heal his servant. Was he able to do it? Yes, Jesus did it. And he knew that this man, having known nothing more about him other than believing his word, he was going to do it. So Jesus was able to heal that centurion's servant because the centurion believed that he could do it. Do you believe God can heal you? Do you believe that he can do anything? Yes, he can, because he is the Son of God. And so Jesus had not seen any type of faith just like that, even in all Israel. And so this was great, that this man who was not a Jew. This man was a man just like you and I, a Gentile. Yes, he believed God, and God heard him through his son Jesus. And so I think that's awesome. Now, we know that you need to tell somebody your testimony. I know it. I hope you know it too. Let's look in Revelation, and we're going to see what God says about that. Revelation chapter 12, verse 11. He says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. Who is that him? It's the devil. They overcame the devil by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. These people had their own testimony, and by that testimony, they were able to overcome it. And they loved not their lives unto the death. And so God knows that he can use us to be able to explain to people what God has done. Now, Jesus did his part by dying for us. Yes, he has saved us from our sin with his blood. He's done that part. He did it once for all, and he won't have to do it again. And so we know that Jesus has already accomplished his part. It's now time for us to be a witness and do our part. Now, we don't just have one testimony. God has given us many, many experiences that we can explain to people what God has done in our lives. And it is not just something that's for us, it's something for the whole world. We never know. And this one more thing I want to add to you. This is not a mission impossible. Remember, with God, all things are possible. And so if you think you can't even do it, he can still give you the wisdom, the knowledge, the understanding, and the strength to be able to walk this thing out. And guess what? You're not doing it alone. So tell somebody that. We're not doing it alone. God is with me. He is walking this thing out with me. He will never leave us, nor will he ever forsake us. And so this is so exciting that God has done this for his people and for us. I love to preach God's gospel. Now, I'm telling you, this is part of your testimony. You need to tell somebody what God has done for you. It's important that you let go and let it flow. God bless you. I'll see you next week. Before you go, I'd like you to know that next month, June, is Letter Month. I would love to hear from each one of you all to know how this broadcast has helped you. Has somebody that you know gotten saved? Has someone's life changed? What about your life? I would like you to email me at the address that's right here below so that we would know what's going on in your life. I hope that these broadcasts have been a blessing to you. We've been doing them since June of last year. And so this is a good time to take advantage of an opportunity to ask each one that has been watching to drop me a note. Let me know what you're thinking. God bless you.